allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seated. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll move it.
Second?
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 2 through 4 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the October 10th meeting and approval of the minutes of the October 12th special meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources includes A, approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions, and B, authorization to initiate the hiring process. Any questions on the consent agenda?
I'll move it.
I'll second the motion by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We're ahead of our 4:35 p.m. set time, so we'll move on to item 6 from Building Services. Director Kenny Schmitz, this is an update on the Dorothy Pico Nature Center building floor slab settlement.
Kenny Schmitz, Woodbury County Building Services. The board had a good amount of material in your backup items for this agenda. But this is something I've been working on clear back to March earlier this year. So we've done several things. Initially, we just talked about possibly mud jacking or poly jacking the floor at Dorothy Pico because we thought we had a settlement problem and it was affecting doors. And since that time, we've done quite a bit of investigation and exploratory work. What we did learn, or what we do know, is the lower level west wall and the main level east wall and retaining wall on the south side of the building have either settled or are leaning. We had certified testing services come in and do a floor slab survey analysis. Of that, the main floor in the upper classroom and the storage areas has about a 3.4 inch settlement or movement in that floor. In the lower level office area, there is about a 2.6 inch differential in floor movement. The next item we did is CTS wanted to conduct some soil testing or soil borings within the facility to see what the soil was like underneath. There were 7 borings that we did. Those borings were each 15 to 20 feet deep. The results of that were the compact fill underneath the building was poor. We discovered some 4-inch voids underneath the floor slabs, and those lower level walls in places have settled from 1 to 2 inches. CTS and the architects did make some recommendations going forward. CTS advised not to try to poly level or poly jack the floors and raise them. The floor slabs are actually supported by the foundation walls, or they're resting on the walls. And so they feel if we try to do any leveling and or jacking to raise that back up, we risk damaging some interior walls in doing so. They do recommend we fill the voids that are underneath those slabs. However, we have to identify where actually all of those voids might be. So that's one of the items, is identifying those voids. One of the next items they recommend is to have a surveyor come in and set up
Apologize,
some-
Kenny, we'll have to come back to you. We have our set time now. So the reason we had to break from that is we have our 4:35 p.m. set time, which is item 5 from Board Administration. This is a public hearing and sale of property parcel, also known as 2501 10th Street. Before we receive bids, is there anyone wishing to speak for or against the sale of this property?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Now we're open to receive bids on this property. If anyone wishing to bid would like to approach the microphone, state their name and address, and their opening bid, please.
Hello, my name is Cody Bulware. I live at 2513 10th Street, and I'd like to do the starting bid of $337.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present wishing to bid on the property?
Hearing and seeing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the property in question be sold to Mr. Bolware for $337.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Hearing no discussion or other bids. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Heather will take care of you back there. Sorry about that, Kenny. We're back on your item number 6.
And so CTS's other recommendations is that we hire a surveying company to come in and set up settlement point benchmarks around the building that can be monitored for a minimum of at least a year. So they recommend to monitor those. If settlement continues to occur, then they believe that we should do some helical pilings around the foundation of the building. Since we've done those exploration and studies to date, we did learn a few other things. We stuck a camera down one of the main downspout lines and found the main downspout line was cracked. That's just outside the building, so that is one item that'll need to be addressed. It'll need to be dug up and repaired. They also recommend that we do some exterior soil borings. My guess would be to determine what amount of soil movement or what the soil looks like around the exterior. CMBA Architects has been assisting us throughout this. We've got Terry here tonight. Terry is, or CMBA has listed a set of 5 action items. One of those action items was actually sticking a camera down a downspout, which we've done. The other is following CTS's recommendation to do some east side soil borings, install the settlement monitors recommended by CTS, and perform ground penetrating radar that would help us identify the voids in those floor slabs, and then to investigate some stabilization materials that could be used in those voids. The reason I came to the board tonight, or the reason I got to this point, was I was just getting ready to peak the $10,000 amount that I have currently spent, and really without setting aside project approved funds for this. Now, we have set up a 2024 CIP, which the board has already outlined and set up for $100,000, and Dennis can provide some information on that if need be. But with the current spend of $9,959, and if we add the action items that we plan on looking at to move forward, that would include the items I spoke of. That would be an additional $13,575, which would put us at a project total of $23,534 before we've done any repair work. You've heard me talk a little bit in the past about allocating money for projects and items that come up that kind of catch us off guard, and how I work around the architectural and engineering costs of those. This is a perfect example of that. We're into it 6 months. I've spent almost $10,000. I'm shuffling funds around to keep moving forward, but I reached a point where it's at $10,000 and I felt I can't reallocate funds anymore. I have to identify where those are going to come from and get the board's approval to move forward. Again, our estimate when we originally did the CIP was $100,000, but this has taken a totally different path since that. Again, Terry Glade is here this evening. I'd welcome Terry to come up and try to answer any questions that board members might have. This will be on the agenda again next week for approval to utilize up to at least the $100,000 that's currently allocated in the 24 CIP for it. And Terry can provide more technical detail if necessary here. So.
Yeah, Terry Glade, CMBA Architects. I don't know if you can certainly ask questions. Again, we've done the exploration. I'm not sure if, apologize, I was a little bit late. If Kenny mentioned, we did the analysis of the floor. We looked at everything that was happening inside. When you look at the outside of the building, there's no cracking visible in the exterior brick. So that leads us to believe that there's no settling actually happening of the footings that support the exterior of the building. All this is happening inside. And then once they did the core samples inside and we found actual voids, 4 inches of empty space between the floor slab and the grade below, that tells us something. Somehow water probably got in there at some point and washed out some of that subgrade. Along the east side of the building, when the building was originally designed, there were drainage soils out both the north and south sides of that. At some point, that was leveled off some to provide a handicap sidewalk along that side of the building. And then that downspout drain pipe was installed also to try to catch and divert water. We don't know if that's how all of those factors have been contributing. That's what some of those soil tests would help us with. The ground penetrating radar, they did indicate, I did talk to them, and they could identify those. I mean, basically it would scan all of the areas that are slab on grade to see where the voids might be. And then we could figure out where, what we could, if it's a foam, structural foam we inject into there or something to stabilize that. But it's still a little bit in the investigation phase. But I think it's, according to Brian out there, it's been, things have been kind of happening over time. Doors have started to not work, and it's just something that should be addressed.
To give you an idea of some other costs that are probably going to be associated with this coming forward, if we do have to do some poly fill, we probably will have to take out a retaining wall to get the equipment close enough to the building to do that, and then replace that retaining wall when it's complete. Also, Ben Heisel has questioned whether they have a water feature along one side of the building that has shown quite a bit of movement. He's questioning if that should be removed and replaced as part of this project, and he is probably correct, and I haven't talked to Terry in any detail about that yet. But
And they don't run the water feature currently, right?
they currently quit running it,
Yeah.
yes.
Those are always the beautiful idea to have, but in the Midwest just don't really work. So,
They have to be maintained.
right, and we have freezing temperatures
Extensively.
and water left in the line you gotta blow out. I mean, it's just, every single fountain in the city seems to be a curse to, whatever government body has to maintain them. So, I would prefer that they understand that the board does not want to maintain any fountains or water features for them. They can, if they want to raise money for their fountain every year, they can do that.
And I expect Dan will be at the meeting next week. He plans on being here, so we can have that conversation as well.
So what's the total that we have programmed for this in CIP, that this is going to be a difference of, meaning what we have programmatically, is that the $100,000?
Correct.
And that the board will officially approve next week, but I'd suggest you add in the other costs he's incurred already and do 125,000 up to that. Then if it goes higher than that, come back to the board, but keep all the costs associated with the project together under one expense, not fan it out.
Yes.
But he's had to do that to just get these paid, but I think we ought to well, we end up borrowing 125,000 to give him a max, then he can come back to the board if he needs more.
Is that going to bring you from start to finish as best as you know right now?
As best as I know right now.
That's, yeah.
And last question, is this potentially ARPA eligible,
Probably not for the building.
even though it has a conservation element that gets kids outside and into
Yeah, we're
fresh-
doing the septic tank, so in reality, it might be, we can check into that
Can you please and thank you?
and see what funds we still have left over.
I thought we had some unobligated that was,
We got some unallocated.
Yeah, we have
some-
nearly $1 million now.
And some projects that are finished that have a balance carryover, so we have to figure out how much, I can give you a total of that, what we have available.
I'm just saying the stuff that we unobligated was the,
Standard allowance.
yes, standard allowance, thank you.
The 941.
Which could be
forgot all
used
the-
for anything, is that
Yes,
what
that's
you're
what I'm
alluding to?
saying,
So,
Anything in the county government, except bond payments or lobbying, things like that, retirement funds, but it's pretty broad, it's for everybody.
Supervisor bonuses. That's a joke, we can't use it.
I was glad you have to explain when you're joking.
Mr. Raddick will take all media requests after this meeting.
So, as far as options, you brought up polyfoam jacking, is there like any other alternative companies in town that raise, I know companies that do concrete raising, that don't necessarily maybe have to take out a retaining wall to get down there?
We're still trying to investigate what other options we have for materials.
Okay. Can't just drill a bunch of holes and spray great stuff in there, you know?
A lot of 12-ounce cans.
Thanks for the notice, advance notice.
Thank you.
All right, hearing none other comments on this item. Item 7 from Secondary Roads, County Engineer Mark Nera, includes A, approval of contract for PCC patching 2023 with 10 Point Construction for $59,250.
I recommend approval of the contract.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by Bidinger. All's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of contract for de-icing sand production at the Breezy Pit with Bedrock for $95,000.
Yeah, we're moving excess sand from where we're mining it at Little Sioux Pit up to a place in Breezy Pit where it can be washed and then utilized for winter snow removal purposes.
I'm afraid to ask, what's the difference for de-icing sand? Is it a finer?
De-icing sand is typically washed to get all the clays and silts out of it. It's also screened to where everything is number 8 passing or smaller so that you don't have 1/4-inch grit and above that would break a windshield. So it's a lot finer gradation of the sand, but it also is washed so that you don't get the clumps of clay and silts that hold water that cause little frozen pieces when we're trying to push that through a spreader in the winter.
Mark, for the good of the public, I know you and I talked about this, but there have been some questions raised about why the county was moving the sand from the Little Sioux Pit up to Breezy Pit. Would you just,
Yeah,
please just
It
talk about the
probably looked
process
like
there?
we were just playing with things because we were doing this with our own trucks. It was either we were going to pay Boulder to haul the material from one pit to the other, or we were going to do it with our own staff. So when we had days where we couldn't be productive necessarily on the roads, it was a good day for us to haul sand from point A to point B. One way or the other, it had to get up to where we had the water source available to do the washing and get the material ready. Plus, it gets that sand so it's outside of the main line, and we don't run afoul of OSHA as we go in, or MSHA, I should say, as we go in to get the material to distribute it to the different sheds where we keep salt and sand piles.
And, you know, we want the guys to have fun while they do it too, so.
Well, yeah, I admit it probably does look strange, but it is saving us quite a bit of money in doing that with our own staff.
I'll go ahead and move it.
I'll second the motion by Radig. Any other questions on the Woodbury County Sandcastle? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Item 8 from the Board of Supervisors and the Board Administration Office from Mr. Taylor, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Butler. For information is information relating to the LEC, also updates, financial picture, and plans by the board in reaction to the October 10th joint meeting. Just so no one's overlooked in their comments, let's have each of you three just get through your opening, one after the other, and then we can open it up if that's all right. So whoever wants to go first.
I guess I'll go first. I'll volunteer.
I
Okay.
probably have the most to talk about, so you may as well go first.
So we're going to write in the financial recap summary, and that is in your packet there. That is this page right here. It's the first one, should be. And what I've done there is show the total resources. That hasn't changed. The expenditures, obligations, that has changed a little bit because we did spend 2.7 million, so that has been added on since the last report. Also, the contracts, we did pay some on Hosman, so that did reduce our contract obligation down to 4.927. Just a side note, that does include the 250,000 for the maintenance shed. That's still up in debate whether it's gonna be done or not. So you come down to where we have unallocated or funds available for the project, it's 683,379. Also in those obligations, the Baker Group contract, you'll see down below to match the 4,000,009 up together. Showed how much is left on the Hosman, how much is left on Goldberg, and how much is left on Baker Group. I did make some notes here. The change in the Hosman contract was actually 5,065, which the purchase, or the change orders are included in the packet here, that totaled to $5,065. They did amend the Baker contract on a month-to-month basis for $34,000. I added that onto the group, contract group, Baker Group there. And then also, there's a note that the maintenance shed is still in the Hosman contract. So explain that a little bit better. When it's in the contract, if they don't do it for the maintenance shed, take it away from the contract, that will increase our available funds available up to $933,379. That decision has not been made yet by the authority whether they're gonna do it or not do it. But if they don't do it, I wanted to just make a fine note here to tell you that's gonna raise it because we're reducing the contract. Okay.
Do you mind if I ask a question just of that? In your opinion, and I know I hesitate to ask legal questions here, but because that's in the contract, $250,000 for a maintenance shed, is it your opinion that that money can be moved and be spent elsewhere within the project without authority of either the county? Because that's what the county gave money for and what the county's original expectation was?
Anytime there's a change like that, just like the FF&E where we reduced the contract and we put it over to the county side, I would think something like this where the authority would come back, let the board know what they're doing with the 250,000. If we aren't doing it, where's this money going? I think that's a legitimate question back to the authority. And can they use it somewhere else? As long as the money's still there, I think they can. Now, Joshua, I don't know if Joshua, would you want to attempt to answer this or not legally? But as long as it's in that contract and they don't amend the contract, taking this back out and reallocating to something else, or say, okay, county, you can take the 250 back over here because we aren't going to do it. Reduce the contract.
And do the de-obligation that we,
Yes, like we
Talked
did
about
with
as potential.
941. But we need some kind of a commitment from the LEC authority to say, what are you going to do? I thought they were going to do it at the last meeting, but it didn't happen. There's a lot of other things on the plate.
thank you.
I'll give my update. So this was updated today. Work continues in all areas in other areas of the building, excuse me. The punch list for the county attorney space is completed as far as markups, and the contractor is currently in the correction phase in that area. The punch list for the courts and sheriff's office space will begin the week of October 23rd. To date, 30 fire smoke dampers have been installed. Out of 38, there's one opening left to be cut. And I'll preface this by saying that 30 may be installed, but there are 11 fire dampeners that require electricity to make those dampeners function, and those 11 have not been wired in yet. So there are 30 that are installed. There are 8 more waiting installation, but then there will be 11 that will have to be wired in. And there's only one remaining opening left to cut. We had the state jail inspector out last week, checking on the progress of the jail, and getting everyone ahead of the curve prior to the occupancy inspection. The parking lots have been striped, and landscaping and tree planting are going along nicely, and I think a lot of this rain has been helping quite a bit of that as well. I've got some comments and some clarifications to make in regards to the LEC meeting last weekend, or last Tuesday. I've gotten quite a bit of questions raised and comments raised in the last week. One of those being the Baker Group contract. Going into that meeting, I unfortunately was misunderstanding when we had discussed going to a month-to-month contract, which I felt was the appropriate thing to do until the end of this project. I was told that the contract was going to be for $34,000, and I had made the assumption that that is what we had been paying, and that was not correct. And so that was made aware to me within the meeting, hence my hesitation on that vote. However, one of my concerns leaving the meeting was that at this point in time, if the jail was not, or if the jail had been completed, our contract with Baker Group would have been terminated, and the county would not be incurring the costs of paying Baker Group to still be advising us. And so this would fall under the damages that we will hope to litigate after the jail is complete. One of my concerns was is this $34,000 too high in a way that we're not helping mitigate the damages? Because although we're being damaged, we have a responsibility to try to mitigate and lessen those as much as possible. And so that was my concern, is if the $34,000 a month was more than what we had been previously paying, it opened the door for the other side to potentially argue that we haven't tried to mitigate damages, and it could potentially open the door to say, where else have we inflated the numbers? So I was able to talk with Dennis last week, and the initial Baker Group contract was for 34 months at $1.325 million, which comes out to about $38,970 a month. When it was agreed that the opening date would be moved from April to September, Baker Group agreed that they would do a 6-month contract at $23,000 a month for a total of $138,000. If you combine those totals and average what we've paid Baker Group out over the last 40 months, that comes to an average of $36,575, again, over 40 months. So learning that information, to me, I think it's appropriate that the $34,000 maintains. The $23,000 a month was a gesture to try to get us through, and Baker Group says they just cannot sustain that contract price the rest of the way through, because it was really a gesture to get us done, and even the $34,000 is not necessarily where they would like to be either, but they're trying to be a good partner. So that being said, I think at this point in time, we're in one of the most important times to have an owner's rep out there documenting what's going on, what's completed, what isn't completed, and I think that they've been involved with this project, and I would like to see them continue. One of the other items of contention that came up at the LEC meeting last week and then has continued to spill over into this week was the concerns about Todd and Ron Wick. As we all know, Todd works for Baker Group as our owner's rep that's out at the site every day, and Ron is the chair of the LEC Authority. Todd was hired by Baker Group well after the LEC had had a contract with Baker Group. I think at that time, they could have used a little better judgment, because I think that the two parties should not have been involved. But here we are. Everyone that I have talked to involved with the LEC construction, whether they're subcontractors, whether they're folks within our county government, whether they're folks within Woodbury County law enforcement, have said that Todd is doing an impeccable job. And so there were some comments directed at him that, that he was not up to the task and that he was not doing a good job. And from all indications, I can't find anybody who's out there to substantiate that. And so in regard to this, what I would like to do is I would like to ask Ron, and I'll be making this known at the next LEC meeting, that I believe it would be appropriate for Ron Wick to recuse himself from any discussion or any voting on any future contract or pay discussions with Baker Group in those meetings. I think that that's a fair request. And I think that there's nothing to hide there, and so there's nothing nefarious, and I think that that's an easy ask. One of the other major items of contention that we had at the LEC meeting last week was public comment. We had several people that wanted to ask questions and were shut down. And at the end of the meeting, unfortunately, many of the citizens who had sat through most of the meeting left before I was able to make these comments. But at the next LEC meeting, I will be bringing forth a motion that we allow 2 minutes per agenda item for citizens to ask questions. And then that does not count against the 3 minutes that they would get at the end of the meeting for public concerns. One of the very first things I did when I got on the authority was request that public concerns be added onto the agenda at the end of the meeting. And I think it's fair that if citizens want to come, if they have concerns, if they have questions, they should be able to ask them. And they should be able to ask for as many agenda items as they have questions. And so I will be putting this forward, and I would hope that my other two authority members would support me in that endeavor. And then lastly, I have talked with Matthew Ung last night, and I have requested that we have an LEC update, just like we're doing tonight, every 2 weeks on the agenda at the Board of Supervisors. I think it's appropriate that people, not everyone can make it to an LEC meeting, but they can make it here. They can watch us on YouTube. We have a lot of fans on YouTube. And I think it's appropriate and responsible that they can come here and get updates from me or ask questions of me or this body. So going forward, these are the things that I am working on. Obviously, our common goal is to get this jail not only completed, but completed as soon as possible. It's positive that we've got 30 of the 38 fire dampeners in. It's only the third week of October. And so I think we're moving in the right direction, but I appreciate everyone's patience. I appreciate the emails and phone calls, and I'll always try to answer the questions the best I can. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I was wondering, can I ask one question before I give comments on this item? So in regards to if the public was hearing, well, 30 out of the 38 fire dampers are completed, would they have more assurance that this could be open the next month, or there are a substantial amount of other things outside of that issue to complete that would mean that April 2024 may not move as quickly as we would like up? Just to kind of give, I know we can't nail down with, any sort of finite. I just want to make sure that we're not, like we're almost there, kind of, how would you generally respond to that?
That's tough to answer. 2 weeks, was it 2 weeks ago we toured that, or 3 already now? 3 weeks ago when we toured, there were obvious things outside of the fire dampeners that were not done. I have not been out there since then, so I don't know how much of those things have been completed in the meantime. I think we obviously have a company coming in that's got to do the automatic locks and door openers, that kind of thing, and they're going to need time to complete that. But I am very hopeful that I think there's no reason we shouldn't have these fire dampeners done potentially yet this month, and so then I'll be curious to see what else is left.
Okay, thank you very much. So I put this item on tonight's agenda, and I wanted to make sure that we had the funding, the timeline, and I'd just like to compliment Supervisor Nelson. This kind of information is invaluable, I think, not only to us, but also to the public, and I think the public is wanting to see action. And so some of the things that you brought forward, I think are responses that the public is wanting the county board and then you as an authority member to make, in my estimation. So very, very appreciative of that. The issue that I wanted to raise tonight regards the legal counsel for the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors, in particular, that is separate than the Woodbury County, or the Law Enforcement Center. For about 9 weeks, I've been asking for counsel on a variety of matters, whether it's their bonding authority, if we have to front more money and it exceeds that, the propriety of maintenance funds, the standing of the county. And before I share anything further with the public, I just want to make crystal clear, we have an outstanding county attorney's office who has revitalized the office with prosecutorial diligence, and they work very, very hard. So none of this is directed at them. The issues before the LEC authority with construction maintenance, performance contracts, bonds, all the relationships and dynamics aren't typically what a county attorney's office deals with. So I think it's fair to say that we've been told that outside counsel is what is needed and recommended. So with all those questions, I want the public to be aware that the LEC authority has represented to us that it has retained Jody McDougall of Frederickson and Byron, PA. That's a construction attorney in Des Moines. I called a construction attorney that is, I believe, one of the leading ones in the state, personal connection with, and he represented that she most often represents the Baker Group. And so when that came up 33 days ago, we were told that it would be advisable to have this board and the LEC authority represented jointly, potentially by her. I made a phone call because I had questions 33 days ago. I was told not to contact her by Shane Albrecht from the Baker Group. Shane Albrecht said, you need to have an engagement letter. So we have waited. We've waited for over a month for this engagement letter. We were told later on that this board would have to sign a conflict waiver because clearly there's a conflict. I mean, to me, it would be just as much as if we had Goldberger Hausman's attorney representing us, and that she would require that waiver. We have yet to see that. To me, it is a disadvantage to the public and the taxpayers. We're now on day 7. We're still waiting for this. If that waiver comes, I've been told that we will have to sign that publicly, and I believe it would be a huge mistake by this board. You just heard a hiring that was full of and rife with conflict of interest. Now, we are suggesting that the County Board of Supervisors use an attorney that has typically represented the Baker Group. And I can guarantee you one thing, I have no presupposition that the Baker Group has any liability, but I know that you're not going to receive a fair review. I mean, that's clear. So I've requested to know, I was told today that someone in the legal profession reviewed every single document on the LEC Authority's website and cannot find a contract with Jody McDougall or Byron and Frederickson. You can find one for Allers and Cooney that's signed. You can find a conflict waiver that's signed because Allers has represented both Woodbury County Board of Supervisors and the authority. We don't even know if the authority has retained her. I've never seen that contract. So that's an information request I think that we deserve to know. Is she actually representing them, or is this just a call from the Baker Group to say, take advice from the Baker Group's, somebody that has retained her often, although she does work for another firm and is not on the Baker Group staff and don't want to misrepresent it as such.
Jeremy, could I cut in just
Sure.
a second? So Jeremy called with these questions earlier today, and I heard back from Shane right before the meeting. He said on the August 29th LEC meeting that a contract with Frederickson Bryan was approved 3-0.
Okay.
Now, why it's not, in the minutes, or if it's buried within the minutes somewhere, I'm not sure. But he said on the August 29th, which was 2 weeks prior to my appointment onto that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If that could be updated on the website, and then.
For sure.
Do you know if they were asked to sign a conflict waiver, or if that was?
He was going to check into that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
I will stay up on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And then my last thing is, some people may ask, and I know we get this from taxpayers, which is very fair, why hire more attorneys? Why not just keep our interests aligned? I think we can. And so my hope is that if we did hire outside counsel, they would keep our interests aligned, that they would work in a non-adversarial way. They do an independent review, so we can answer taxpayers on the Baker Group maybe there is no liability, and that's fine. But somebody needs, in my opinion, review that contract, also see what third-party claims, including lost revenue, can be settled by us versus them, and how that works. Answer questions on the bond cap, the propriety of maintenance funds. So these are things that I think we deserve to know. If that doesn't come forward, I am going to ask that we at least vote on it. And may not be the most popular thing, but at this point, we're all individually elected, and I just think it's the right thing to do. And so those are my comments on that, all told. So, thank you.
So, one thing again for the public to understand, though this is gonna be a building heavily used by the county, it is not the county's project. It is the LEC Authority's project. So we are a partner in the project by creating the authority with the city of Sioux City. We are by far the major investor of the project as far as financing goes. And we are also the most damaged by it not being open on time because we have a budget that depended on revenue. So our interests are not necessarily the same, but they are. I do think we need our own attorney. And I do think, in my view, that there is a extreme conflict to have hired the same attorney. So you can take that to the LEC if you want. I know she said she believes she's looked over everything and there is no conflict. When I attended last week's closed session, I was kind of taken aback by the fact that I've been in a ton of closed sessions in the last, I don't know how long I've been in city and county, 15 years. I can't remember any closed session where we had somebody that was potentially at risk or liable for any involvement present in the closed session, and then you hired that person's attorney. So I can't even think of any time somebody was present, let alone their attorney was also present. I guess I'm as angry and upset as anybody else that maybe, sees what's going on from the outside and this project isn't done. Well, what was the incentive to not get it done? And here we get paid more to not get it done. So I don't know. I have some real issues with this project not being done. It's already been extended a couple times as far as I know, and now to see it going into potentially April of 2024 is obscene. And when we were discussing things, to find out that there is no project manager, how did that even happen? So an owner's rep versus a project manager, but every signature and all the backup is a project manager. I don't know. I'm a little worried. So I would say I was really angry last week and I didn't speak up because I didn't want to maybe show that. But I've had a week to think about it, and I got to hear everything everybody said today. And as the major investor on behalf of the taxpayers, I do think not only should we have our own outside legal counsel, but if the closed sessions are run the way they are, we probably also shouldn't be present. Maybe just the chair. I just don't think I feel comfortable with it. Just me. I want this project done. I want it done right. I want what we paid for. I think we're owed that. I think the taxpayers are owed that. I want some kind of teeth that say this project gets done, but where are those at? So, I don't know. Nobody can answer that here tonight. I know none of you, I'm not blaming anybody else on the Board of Supervisors. As I said, it's not our project. We're just the financier and the investor. So, yeah, that's, I guess, all I got for now.
Well, I will certainly attend as many meetings regarding this topic as possible, whether or not the board's involved. I do know that we'll still be able to reach out to their attorney on a privileged basis or through our attorney's office if need be individually. I think that's been communicated to our attorney's office or myself and possibly the board as well. And certainly would hope that there'd be a cooperative relationship if the county does pursue another law firm. And I think that is something that we need to assume and expect. The major issue to me is related to the county being the major investor, and that's damages. We can find a lot of things to bicker about and complain about and say need correction, and they're all valid points. But at the end of the day, the law firm we choose needs to be able to expedite the damages and the claims process. And we all understand, hopefully, that the project needs to be finished, before meaningful action can be taken on that point. But anything that would defer from that or introduce new layers of potential conflict, I just urge the board to use some caution on that. I'm not saying we don't need to go to another firm. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that when you get attorneys involved and you get several attorneys, different parties involved, and you have a claim, the analogy I made at the very beginning of this, process was that, you have several insurance companies, and we don't want to, delay the claim. We already have a delayed project. And I do echo some of the concerns of Mr. Taylor regarding, the makeup and relationships. However, I haven't seen anything that would give me pause that the, recuperation of the damages is anything that would, that there'd be a conflict there. There has to be cooperation between the authority and the board to supply reporting, to supply data, in order to come up with the right figures and to assign, claims where they should be, so that one hand doesn't, one hand knows what the other hand is doing. And so I rely on our county attorney's office if we are to seek another firm to do some vetting on that. I know you brought one forward, Mr. Taylor, and we are also at the same time waiting for that response that was requested by the board several weeks ago. I can't speak to why there is that perceived delay, but it would be helpful for the board to also know that answer, perhaps in the same week or before the board takes other action. So, again, my focus, hearing all this is it just goes back to there's a lot of legitimate claims we have over the process, but the foundational responsibility of this board on behalf of the taxpayer is to make sure that the claim is recouped and in a timely fashion, and that there's cooperation between the firm or firms that handles that. And there is assurance, it's not a possible thing. It is going to happen. We will fairly assign those claims, and we'll make sure that either the authority does it, or if we need to do it, that the county does it. But that is something that all these different talks of change orders and new contracts, there's several different layers of accountability that will enter into that claim. There's the federal revenue, there's the errors and omissions, there's insurance claims, and that's going to be primary in my mind as we look at this question.
I'd like to just touch on a couple of things that Keith said, because I've had some of the same questions pointed towards me as well. In regards to, I've had a lot of people ask, well, why isn't there penalties for being late? There most definitely are. The problem is that Hausman bid the project that was presented to them. And the project that was presented to them did not include 38 fire dampeners that are required by code. And so because they were not there, we have two options, which is either to have the finish date, which we cannot occupy the building without those, or the plans have to be redone to include those dampeners. When the plans are redone, the clock starts over. And so now we are at the mercy of the timetable of what it takes to get those fire dampeners done. Once those are done, then we can go back to discussing penalties for the delays of the opening. And so that's unfortunate, but when these projects are bid, there's not margin for oopsies, well, we forgot something, so we're just gonna, that's not how that works. And so Hausman, really, the clock started over for them when these fire dampener issue was raised. In regards to Baker Group, and I think, Keith, you said that they have delayed the project so they can keep getting paid.
Well, I just suggest that they benefit by it not, sorry, mic's off. They do financially benefit from it not being done if by getting an extension, they get paid more.
Yeah, and that is true.
And for every change order, they also get an additional percentage. So, it just seems contrary to how most contracts and construction projects are, whereas if it takes longer, you usually don't get rewarded.
And if I could just say to that, can I add one thing? We had them do 400 steam traps in this facility, in the Woodbury County Courthouse, and they had into the contract some language alluding to if it's extending past a certain date, that they're going to get paid more. And that's something that I believe our assistant county attorney identified and said, no, that needs to be taken out of the contract. Now, I'm just suggesting that there are certain things that we could bolster or at least have looked at, and it may not lead to a conclusion that there's any liability. I don't know. I just know, to beat the dead horse from before, that having an independent review may be helpful, so.
Yeah, and Keith's right, they do stand to gain, and to Jeremy's point, in my short time on this authority, there's a lot of things in the contract that I never would have agreed to. I mean, there is. And so, there's a lot of things I take issue with, but that is the contract that we are bound to today, and there's nothing we can change about that. But in that regard, I think it's important that people understand that that Baker Group is not the ones hiring the subcontractors. They're not the ones setting the work schedules. They cannot make people show up to work. They cannot make certain things in the building, construction, certain parts of the building happen. They cannot fire contractors, subcontractors. All they could do is make recommendations, help scheduling, bring these issues to light. The attorney can send letters of concerns, that sort of thing. And so I do kind of take offense to say that somehow that Baker Group, failed to hire more subcontractors or didn't make people show up on Saturday or Sunday. They have no power to do that. And that's the contractor and their subs that are responsible for that. So while they do stand to gain, it was not that they in any way could delay the work that was being done out there, unfortunately. So I just wanted to point out those two areas of clarification. And Supervisor Bittinger, I guess if you have anything to add, we'd probably love to hear it, so.
I think a lot of you guys have covered a lot of it. I do have concerns. I agree with Supervisor Taylor and Raddick. I still have some concerns. I'm not saying there's anything that Ms. Jody, that there's anything that she would do anything wrong or unethical. I just think there's some concerns overall from the project with dual representation. Not saying there's anything, and not saying that any one of the lawyers would do anything to put themselves in jeopardy. I'm just saying from an outside perspective, I have some concerns still. But no, you guys have covered everything. In the meeting last week, I know Supervisor Nelson and I both asked for fees to be decreased for the Baker Group. I asked for a $1 increase until the end of the project. Supervisor Nelson asked for those fees to be cut in half, and so I think that would have shown goodwill to the people, taxpayers. But that's another conversation. But the only thing I would have is just to go back with the LEC, just with the parliamentary procedures, every person's allowed to speak on one issue on each agenda item, and that has to be addressed. I think that meeting was kind of very poorly run, and that looked bad, I think, for all parties involved, that it was just from parliamentary procedures, it was poorly run, and we need to change that. So if you can take some of those regards and just help with that. But no, I agree. I think there's concerns with representation, but that's all that I have to add.
And I guess I didn't comment on the representation, but I do think that there is a legitimate possibility that the county has a different interest than the LEC as far as damages. And the only way we're gonna get there is with either our counsel, whether that's the county attorney or outside counsel. And I'm not an attorney, I don't pretend to be, but I could see where this body could litigate for damages, separate to what the authority's doing. And so, in that regard, I don't think it's inappropriate at all to ask for any outside counsel. So,
Well, I think anything that acts like an encouragement to get the project done. It was supposed to be done in March of '23, right? And then it was supposed to be done September of '23. And now we get a letter that said, what was April of '24? And it needs to be done. And whatever, reasons, I'm not blaming Baker 100%, I'm not blaming Hausman 100%, but, when you look at the accountability side of things, they signed contracts, right? And there was a contract for Goldberg to design it, a contract for Hausman to build it, and a contract for Baker to manage it, right? That's the contracts. So there's accountability with those contracts. And of course, us as the Board of Supervisors watching from afar what is done by the LEC authority, it definitely is getting to the point where it's way beyond that date, and like I say, it's going to affect us financially. And it is our job to make sure that we are, protecting the investors, us, the taxpayers, in this project.
So because there has been questions in the past about what has transpired at those open, portion of the meetings for the authority, Mr. Nelson, are those meetings recorded by the authority itself? And if not, is that something you could suggest they do? Because I think it's in our interest, especially when there's an overlap of a meeting, as happened last week,
yep.
for there to be some agreement on what was discussed and what was covered.
I know that they're not video recorded. Karen, do you know, is there any audio recordings?
I have the recordings of those meetings.
You do?
They're not filed anywhere. I just keep them on my iPad.
Could they be posted? And is there any reason why we couldn't video record them? I mean, I know there's other meetings outside of the Board of Supervisors meeting that we've made sure made their way to the site.
I was never told to.
Sure.
I did it just for me, for
Minutes.
notes taken.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
But is there any reason we couldn't?
No, I see no reason why not, yeah.
I think that would be a good move.
I mean, ideally, the authority would approve that process and it would be on the same place where all those contracts are. But absent that, I think they could at least, I don't know if it matters if they consent, but we have, a county representative on that committee. And we do have, our own, committee page where we do post as much as possible about our different boards and commissions where we have a representative. So I do think since they're open, it would be proper.
Yeah, I've got no problem requesting that.
Thank you.
So,
And I want to echo your comments before. I think the transparency and candor you've shown in the last several meetings and months, Mr. Nelson, has been refreshing. And this is the kind of update that I envision when, I put the item on the agenda to put you on. And, I'm sorry we couldn't get to it sooner.
The other thing I want to bring up first is just myself and Supervisor Raddick getting on the site. So, Mark, does that go through you or who?
Yeah,
who
I
do
can
need-
work on that.
Okay, yeah, I think that needs to be expedited quickly.
And not to be Johnny come lately, but after you two come out there, I'll go alone one day.
Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street, Mobile. This is exactly what you guys need to be doing. And I think that what you're talking about, having a report every 2 weeks, is spot on, because we have to prove that we are mitigating those damages. The one thing that I would like to see added to that is that we bring Sheriff Sheehan in on that also, because we have spent a lot of money incurring a lot of expense, anticipating that we'd have income off of this, and that income isn't there. And we can't get rid of those expenses. We can't fire those people that we've hired, because we wouldn't be able to get them back. But we have to somehow show that we are doing our due diligence to whoever has to pay this, because however we show that we mitigate their expenses, we are also mitigating the taxpayers' expenses. So I applaud you for everything you're doing. It sounds like that closed meeting didn't go much better than the open meeting, and that open meeting was a disaster. That was truly an embarrassment. And I hope that the things that Mr. Nelson is asking them to do will make future meetings be much better than that. So we can do better than that. We always have. So we just need to have those expectations. Thank you very much.
And I will make sure we have an open item every couple weeks. I believe we've been promised a closed session with the authority every 2 weeks. And so naturally, on those dates would make sense, unless there's something the board wants to bring up, and we can even have it weekly if we need to. But I do agree with inviting the sheriff to those items, because we've heard that the extra staffing has decreased overtime a little bit, which is nice to know. But it would be nice to know what the game plan is for those employees, what they're being used as right now, if there's any permanent changes they're seeing they want because they're fully staffed or perhaps even overstaffed at the moment, would be good. So from a public safety standpoint, how are things progressing with all of the staff and where they're being set up? And, since they're fully onboarded, what is the time, table to actually implement them over there? And probably very short, but those things are good to know. Sir?
Steve Corey, 1757 290th Street, Salix. I've come into this conversation kind of at the bottom of the ninth inning here just last week, and the picture is getting a little clearer for me as a taxpayer/investor. And I want to first of all thank Supervisor Nelson for digging in like you are. Not only that, but Supervisor Taylor and Raddick. I'm 100% on board. The word boondoggle sort of comes into mind a little bit from everything I'm hearing, like I say, coming in late to the game. I guess what I would like to see is a post-mortem on this whole project after it's over with, and say, okay, and be able to look into it and report back to us as to what went wrong, who, why, etc. It's back to the accountability word that's being thrown around a lot today. I think that's how we have to do it, so that in the future, when we have big projects like this, we don't make the same mistakes again. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Taylor, Nelson, Dennis, anything else to add informationally?
There will be a closed session 9:30 Friday, this coming Friday.
But just for the good of the public, since you said that that's between the authority and its council, not between the authority and the supervisors.
The board is included.
Is
It's
that
going to
your
be joined every
I
2
was
weeks
just
till
told
the
that
board is
today.
updated. I think that's correct.
Is that your understanding, Supervisor Nelson, that this is a county?
I knew we had a closed session. I was not told, but I agree. They said we were gonna have a closed session every 2 weeks, but I thought it was maybe next week was when that started, but I will for
If
sure
we could
check
get
yet.
clarification on
Yeah.
that, just because when I was sitting in the illustrious chairman's seat, I found out about it because it had been published. So it may be good to find out so that those of us who otherwise have a day job on Friday morning at 9:30 would be prepared. So if we can get some communication and not trying to throw stones, I realize the LAC authority isn't the highest paid position, but if we could get some better communication just for expectation management, that'd be great.
And I found out about it a few minutes ago from Dennis before the meeting too, so.
I believe they just set the date today, this morning, so it's not been planned very long, but I just sent a text and hopefully I have an answer back before the end of the meeting, so.
Great. Any other comments from the board? Any, I'm not sure we can answer them, but any questions or comments from the public? All right, thank you. Item 9 is reports on committee meetings.
I have nothing this week.
The Conservation Department, the Conservation Board is having their department head appreciation picnic Thursday evening down at Bigelow Park at Browns Lake. We're going to have our regular Conservation Board meeting at 4, and then they are going to do a tour of the new concession stand, restroom, beach, parking area, that all the work that they've done down at Bigelow Park, and then have a meal afterwards. I think, sounds like a couple supervisors are going to make it down
Yeah,
there.
I'll be there.
Jeremy? Yep. So if you guys haven't seen it, it's really great, and look forward to that. That's all I have.
Potentially in an overabundance of caution, we might want to post a notice of gathering. Already done, Karen?
I got to
before we
Karen this
even-
afternoon,
Thank you
so.
very much.
Item number 10, any citizen concerns? Hearing none. Item 11, any board concerns?
The Sioux City Go event, what, I couldn't open that. I can get my PDF deal to work on my email. When is that? Dan, I know, said he was going.
October 26th at 8 a.m.
Oh. And where is it? What is it?
Sioux City Country Club. It's a corporate connections event.
Okay.
And yes, a hot breakfast will be provided, I saw that, so
That's an
definitely a
incentive,
Keith
see?
Raddick attended event.
Incentives work, right?
That was his next question. And what's going to be served there? Any other board concerns?
I have none.
None?